Feliz Navidad. Feliz Navidad. Próspero año y felicidad. Feliz Navidad. Feliz Navidad. Feliz Navidad. Próspero año.
Hello, Mosaic. Welcome to church. I'm so glad that you joined us here today. My name is Joe, and I'm one of our pastors here, and I'm so excited because today we have such a gift. We've got a message that Pastor Erwin shared with some friends of ours at City Harvest Church. And this talk is all about how we can really step into following Jesus into a new year and be ready for all that God has for you. And so wherever you are in your spiritual journey, I know that today's message can really impact you in a powerful way. And so I just want to encourage you, lean in, be ready, and be willing to hear and to respond to what God has for you today. And one way that you can practically really be a part of what we're doing is to invite a friend. So right now, just grab your phone, and I want you to text 5 friends, send them the link, mosaic.org/live, because this is one thing that we get to do together, is to remind people that they don't have to do life alone. And so send that text out, encourage people, make those phone calls, because today's gonna be a really beautiful day. And we know this year has been full of a lot of challenges and a lot of really beautiful celebrations. And here on this last Sunday of the year, we just want you to know that we're here to pray for you. That if you're going through some things and you need just a tribe to come alongside you, that you need a support system and whatever's going on in your life, then I want to encourage you right now, go to mosaic.org/prayer, and you can fill out a form and let us know how we can pray for you. Or even right now, we have a whole team of people that are here to pray for you, and all you have to do is just click that prayer button, and we'll let you know that you're not doing this alone. We've got an incredible opportunity coming up that I want to let you know about. See, every year we have incredible students who join us for a 1-year program called Mosaic College, and the next semester is starting soon. And so I want to throw out the invite. I want to put out the call that wherever you are, if you're in Brazil, if you're in Buenos Aires, if you're in the Philippines, this is available to you because Mosaic College is now online. So what we do is we take a year and we just pour into your spiritual life. We unpack the scriptures. You'll have incredible professors that are going to shape who you're becoming. And we are just looking for incredible women and men that want to create a more beautiful world through the heart of the church. So don't wait. Go to the website, mosaic.org/college, and apply right now because the deadline is coming up. It's January 4th. Do not miss this. Before we get to hear this incredible message from Pastor Erwin, we've got an opportunity to worship together. And I love worship because what it does for me is it just creates this space for me to receive all that God has for me. It allows me to align my heart to just say, God, I want to thank you for all that you've done. So whatever has happened to you this year, let's let this last opportunity to worship be a chance for us to say, God, we thank you no matter what.
I would have nothing if it wasn't for you. Beautiful one. Look where we started, how far we've come. I'm running after your love. Leaving it all to take all of you. Love of my soul. infinite love, beautiful one who lift you up. You are so good to me. I'll give you everything. Infinite love, beautiful one who lift you up. You are so good to me. I'll give you everything. Infinite love, beautiful one who lift you up. You are so good to me. I'll give you everything. Infinite love, beautiful one who lift you up. You are so good to me. I'll give you everything. Leaving it all, take all of you. Love of my soul, you and only you. It's only you.
Somebody love,
Somebody love.
let me help you.
Love of my soul, you
And only
you. It's only you.
giving it
It's
all.
only you.
Take hold of you.
Love of my soul, you and only you. It's only you. Somebody love, wrapped in your beauty. Love of my soul,
You and only you. It's only
infinite love, beautiful one who lifts you up. You are so good to me. I give you everything. Infinite love, beautiful one who lifts you up. You are so good to me. I give you everything. You are so good to me.
I'll give you everything.
I give you everything.
You're so good to me. You are constant in the way that you forgive me. Steady as the moon that shifts the tide. Consistent in the way that you believe in me. And true in how you choose me every time. To the end, I will stand with you to the end. Devoted to you to the end. I will sing to you to the end. You are constant in the way that you amaze me. Steady as the moon that brings the night. Consistent in the way that you're redeeming me. And true in how my past won't change your mind. To the end, I'll stand with you to the end. Devoted to you to the end. I will sing to you to the end. To the end, you can count on me to the end. Faithfully to the end, I will sing to you to the end. Till time runs out and my breath wastes thin, you will hear my voice, my imperfect melody. And when my bones are dust and my hands can't raise, you will hear my voice and my love will last till time runs out and my breath wastes thin. You will hear my voice, my imperfect melody. And my bones are dust and my hands can't raise. You will hear You can count on me. Faithfully to the end. You can count on me. Oh, to the end.
What a year 2020 has been. And we're almost at the end of it. We're now beginning to move into a new year, a new beginning. And for me, the question remains the same. In spite of all the challenges we face, the hardships we face, I mean, think about what we've seen this year, from a global pandemic to international quarantines, to every one of us facing challenges that were so unexpected. Now, some of you, even right now, are in the middle of those challenges. Some of you lost your jobs. Some of you have lost your dreams. Some of you have seen your world turn completely upside down, and you're trying to figure out what in the world is God doing in the middle of this, and how am I supposed to approach this moment in my life? But I want to ask you a different question today, because so many of our questions are about just hanging on. So many of our questions are about surviving. So many of our questions are looking backwards. I want to ask you a question that's going to hopefully move you to look at your life going forward. What kind of world will we create? So we have 2020. We have challenges that were unexpected. We face global issues that have seemed almost insurmountable, and we're still in the middle of it. We're not through it. We're in the middle of this tsunami. But what can happen so oftentimes in the middle of crisis is that all we do is just try to hold on. We just try to survive. We get a mentality of paralysis and fear and maybe even apathy. But if this is the moment that we're in, if this is the moment that God has chosen to place us in this moment in history, then we need to realize that we have the same mandate, we have the same stewardship, we have the same responsibility, and we have the same opportunity to create a world that humanity desperately needs. I want us to go back to Isaiah 61, verses 1 through 6. These are words, for those of us who are familiar with the scriptures, that are descriptive of Jesus, of his coming into the world, long before Jesus stepped into human history. These words were a description of his mission, his mandate, of what he would do when he walked on this earth. This is what Isaiah wrote. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and to provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. Strangers will shepherd your flocks. Foreigners will work your fields and vineyards, and you will be called priests of the Lord, and you will be named ministers of our God. You will feed on the wealth of nations, and in their riches you will boast. I think this declaration is so astonishing, even in the time of Isaiah, with oppression and captivity, and the average everyday person would not look at that moment in their life in the time of Isaiah and think, oh, tomorrow's going to be better than today. Oh, we have a bright and wonderful future. I mean, the people of Israel went from conquest to conquest to conquest, from dominion to dominion to dominion, from oppression to oppression to oppression, whether it was the Egyptians or the Chaldeans or the Persians, the Medes, whether it was the Romans or the Babylonians. It seemed that the entire history of Israel was a history of longing for a better future in the middle of an overwhelming present. I think that in many ways depicts and describes the kind of moment that we're in right now. We long for a better future, but if you take the material of this moment, it seems almost absurd to think that tomorrow can be better than today. And yet Isaiah describes the coming of this Messiah, the Christ, this one that we come to know as Jesus, that his view of the future was so dramatically different, and what he would call us to become was so extraordinary. Go back up to the beginning of this in verse 1. And let's just set the backdrop. It says, the Spirit of the sovereign Lord is on me because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news. Let me just stop here for a moment because the description is extraordinary, but there's a posture that is the beginning point here because you cannot proclaim what you do not see. You cannot proclaim what you do not know. You cannot proclaim what you do not have conviction of. And so when he says, I'm here to proclaim good news, it tells us that he sees what we cannot see. And one of the things that happens when you begin to connect to who God is in your life and you begin to allow God to shape not only who you are as a person, but how you see the world around you and even how you see the future, it changes your posture and it allows you to address the question, what kind of world will you create from the vantage point of the world that God would create through you? Because you can see what the world cannot imagine. And that's the beginning point. Before we get to the descriptions that are so elegant and poetic and beautiful and life-giving, that we have to see that he had to be able to imagine a different world than everyone else. And when you connect to the Spirit of God, when the Spirit of God is on you, when God anoints you to see, you begin to see a future that others can't see. You begin to imagine a future that others cannot imagine. And so in the middle of crisis, you see creation. In the middle of despair, you see hope. In the middle of a moment where everyone is overwhelmed and is confused and is afraid, you begin to see hope and courage and new possibilities. And so if you want to step into the posture that Jesus stepped into when he walked on this earth, you have to allow God to begin to give you the eyes to see what no one else can imagine. When I used to work with the urban poor, one of the things I discovered was that when you're on the outside looking in, you begin to realize, oh, there's a poverty of food, there's a poverty of housing, there's a poverty of economic opportunity. And you can see these really tangible spaces where poverty affects a person's everyday life. But what I didn't see until I was there for over a decade was that even though there's a shortage of food and a shortage of housing, and a shortage of opportunity, what is the greatest deficit that poverty steals from you is the ability to see a better life, is the ability to imagine a different future. It's the loss of a dream. And when I began working with people, at first I was just trying to help a person get a job or get a place to live or have a different relationship to their income and to their struggle through welfare. And I began realizing that before I could help anyone with anything concrete, I had to actually begin to work with their inner posture. I had to convince them that their life could be better, that their life could be different. I had to begin to deal with the poverty of imagination, the poverty of a dream. And if you can help a person begin to dream of a new life, of a new world, of a new themselves, then you have the material to work with to help that person create a new life. What God does with those of us who are his people, as he places his Spirit within us, is that we're not blind to the possibilities of a better future. We do not let despair, we do not let fear or hopelessness become the filter through which we see life. You can see what the world cannot imagine. People have lost not just their jobs in 2020. They've lost not just their stability in 2020. They've not just lost their hopes in 2020. People have lost their imagination. They've lost their dreams, and they've lost the capacity to see a future that humanity desperately needs. When God's Spirit begins to work in me, I begin to see things I couldn't see before. I begin to dream new dreams and imagine a new future. And I begin to realize that imagination is the playground of God, where God begins to show me what he can do in me and what he can do through me. And I want you right now to realize that the imagination is where God begins to paint the future into our souls. It's in our imagination, through our dreams and this capacity to have vision, that God begins to allow us to see what no one else can imagine. What is it that you can no longer see that you used to be able to see? Have you lost your ability to see a better tomorrow, a better future? a better life, a better you, a better marriage, a better friendship? Well, what is it right now that you need God to give you new eyes because you've become blind to the possibilities? And one of the ways you can know you've become blind to a better future is you become bitter. You start struggling with depression. You start struggling with despair. You start getting angry with other people. In fact, you lose the ability to celebrate someone else's success because someone else's success feels like it's at the deficit of your success. When you see a better future, when you can imagine a better world, you celebrate the success of other people. You celebrate everywhere you see good happening. You celebrate where others are moving into their dreams and their longings. That's how I can actually check my own soul. So when I can celebrate the success of another person, I know that my soul is healthy. When I feel angry or embittered or frustrated when someone else is succeeding, I know that's not really about them. That's actually about the health of my own soul. Because when you begin to imagine a different world, then you want that world for everyone, not just yourself. He goes on and says, I've come to proclaim good news to the poor. He's not just talking about economic poverty. He's talking about the poverty that consumes from us the ability to live life, to enjoy life, to be filled with love and compassion, to be filled with forgiveness and concern. He says, he has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted. I love that declaration. Because what happens when we begin to create a different future, a better future, is not only do we begin to see a world that no one else can imagine, but we begin to heal where there are only wounds. And I think this is the moment we're living in right now, is that when I talk to people, people have a really hard time remembering a life they loved. They have a hard time remembering great memories. They have a hard time actually living in a space filled with hope and optimism. When I have conversations with people, I'm amazed how quickly everybody moves to a negative conversation. They move to something that's not working in their life. They move to something that has caused them an incredible amount of discouragement or depression. They move to someone else's life that's not doing well. And you need to pay attention to your language, because what's happened right now in this moment is that we've become so focused on everything that's lost that we've become one significant open wound as a species. But here's the beautiful thing. When the world is broken, that's exactly where Jesus becomes more clear, more visible, where Jesus becomes undeniable, because he brings healing to the brokenhearted. He is the one who actually heals the deepest wounds of our lives. And by the way, you can know what we're supposed to do by what Jesus came to do. See, so we know we're supposed to proclaim good news because Jesus came to proclaim good news. We know that we're supposed to heal the brokenhearted because Jesus came to heal the brokenhearted. Our mission, our task, our calling, our opportunity is everything Jesus came to do. Because when he walked on this earth, it was only for 33 years. For the rest of history, he has walked on this earth through us. It's our hands and our feet, our words, our lives that are actually the manifestation of Jesus to the world. And so he brings healing where there are only wounds through his people. And I wish it wasn't the way it is, but this is the reality. You know how God makes you a healing salve for someone else's wounds? He lets you bear those wounds and find healing. The only wounds you can actually heal are the wounds that you have been willing to bear and have found healing for yourself as well. When you're healed from a wound, you find the salve that heals other people's wounds. You know, this year for me has been a year of accidents and injuries and physical catastrophes. And in fact, this last summer, I think it was around July, I was in Mexico, and I was playing with paddle tennis with my family, and we had a great time. You know, we were there for so many days. I played, I don't even know how many matches, and everything was fine. It was on the very last match, on the very last night before we came back to LA. I was running, and somehow, I think my knee gave out. I started going down. My paddle hit the ground, exploded back up, hit me in the face, and next thing I knew, my face had exploded. Now, I'm on the ground, sort of rolling in pain. my son Aaron's on the other side of the court, and he thought I was just exaggerating it. When Mariah ran over and saw me, she saw the blood everywhere, and when I looked into her eyes, I knew that I was in trouble. And they took me to a medic, then another medic, then another medic, then another medic, until they found a surgeon that was willing to operate on my face in Mexico. And they had to do 3 layers of stitching from the inner meat that had been torn apart to the middle section to the surface section. And I thought for the rest of my life, I'm going to have this massive scar across my face. And what was so fascinating to me is when I got back home and Kim saw it because she wasn't with me. She just felt so terrible for me. And we've never had this conversation in our entire lives. And I knew how bad it was when Kim said to me, honey, don't worry. You could get plastic surgery. And you know, we can fix that wound. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And she goes, no, I don't want you to feel bad about it. It's your face, and they have an ability to do that now. You can get plastic surgery, and no one will ever see it. And I kept telling her, I'm going to live with the scar. And I thought it was so fascinating because I wasn't sure if she was telling me I needed to have plastic surgery because she was having to look at me, or whether she was worried about me having to look in the mirror. But I just made a determination that my scars are the roadmap of my life. And I'm just going to live with the scar. And the surgeon did a great job. There's a minimal scar. I'm not too worried about it. But I have far more significant scars on my body. But what I think so many times in life, we actually want to avoid the scars and avoid the wounds. But it's actually through the wounds and through the scars that God shapes us and makes us the healers of the world. The pain that we go through is the material from which God shapes us and uses us to be those who bring healing to the pain of others. So if you ever felt like God has let you down, going, God, why have you allowed me to experience this pain? God, why have you allowed me to have a broken heart? It's because you cannot bind the brokenhearted if you've never known a broken heart. And God wants to use us as his people as the healing salve to the world. But he goes on to say, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners. And what God wants to remind us in the middle of all of this crisis and catastrophe is that we are the ones that are to bring hope in the midst of despair. We're the ones that God shaped because, see, Jesus came to the world to proclaim freedom for captives and release from darkness for the prisoners. It's Jesus who came to do that, to set us free when we feel overwhelmed. And the crazy thing about it is that most of us are not political prisoners. Most of us have not actually experienced incarceration, although some of us have. And we understand what it's like to experience the loss of our freedom. One of our pastors here at Mosaic was in federal prison for 5 years. And he would talk about the incredible loss of that freedom and what it did to him and how it affected him psychologically and emotionally and relationally and spiritually. And yet he's one of the people that God has used in such an extraordinary way. And his campus in Mexico City has erupted with growth. And it's because he knows what it's like to be a physical captive. And so he lives his life to bring freedom and release to everyone he meets. Because he also knows that when he stepped out of that prison, he wasn't necessarily free. That freedom doesn't simply come when the door unlocks. The freedom comes when we allow God to bring us that deep inner freedom where he releases us from despair and hopelessness and moves us to hope and to a future. What kind of future are we going to create? Are we going to create a future where we can see a world that no one else can imagine, and we can bring healing to the deepest wounds of humanity and bring hope where people know nothing but despair? It's not in the light that you discover if you're afraid of the dark. It's only when the lights go off and you're surrounded by the darkness that you discover whether you have that internal courage that allows you to keep moving when you can't see right in front of you. A few weeks ago, my wife Kim wanted to get away, and we wanted to go see the leaves change on the East Coast of the United States. And so we took a flight over to New Jersey, and then we rented a car and started driving down what's known as the Shenandoah Mountains. And we were trying to catch that peak season. And sometimes we were too soon, and sometimes we were too late. It never felt like we were really there exactly the right time. And as we're traveling through these mountains, and I have this giant, I don't know why, but they rented this almost like tank, and I have this gigantic SUV truck, and I'm driving through the mountains on these hairpin curves. And to add to that, there were just these immediate drop cliffs. And then if that was not enough, suddenly there was a fog so dense and so thick, you could not even see in front of you. And I'm driving through these mountains, through these hairpin curves, through these edges where the cliffs just drop down, to beyond your capacity to see the bottom. And now I can't even see. And I'm so exhausted driving 5 miles an hour, trying to make it through the darkness, or make it through this fog, make it through this moment of crisis. And there's just this psychological suffocation that happens when you cannot see in front of you. But you have to keep moving forward. Honestly, what I would do in those moments is I would find a car and I would just follow the car. Because even though I couldn't see the road, I could see the car. Even though I couldn't see anything around me, I could still see that car. And I actually found the best way to drive through the fog, the best way to drive when you cannot see, the best way to drive when any misturn would actually send you to your death, is to have someone right in front of you that you can follow. And that's exactly who Jesus is for us in those times of darkness. It's who Jesus is when the world goes dark, when the fog becomes so thick you can't see in front of you. And that's the power of hope, is that even if this moment isn't the moment you would have chosen, even if this moment is filled with darkness, and even if this moment is filled with heaviness, and you're struggling with sadness and sorrow and depression and despair, what I want you to do is just get close enough to Jesus to just follow him through the dark, just close enough to Jesus to follow him through the fog, and he'll get you through to the other side. Because, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. And he goes on to tell us that he'll do not just for the individual, but for all of us. He says, they will rebuild the ancient ruins. I love this, how first he says, this is what I'm going to do in them. I'm going to heal them. I'm going to restore them. I'm going to replace their mourning with joy. I'm going to replace their sorrow with hope. I'm going to replace all the broken pieces within them, and I'm going to heal them. And then this is what they're going to do. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. Strangers will shepherd your flocks, and foreigners will work your fields and vineyards, and you will be called priests of the Lord, and you will be named ministers of our God. You will feed on the wealth of nations, and in the riches you will boast. It says, you will create a new world out of the broken pieces. And this is a shift. I want you to pay attention to this, because in the first point, he begins to tell us everything God is going to do in us, but then he tells us what he's going to do through us. So he's going to bind up our wounds, and he's going to set us free, and he's going to heal our broken hearts, and he's going to create in us a new world. And when he creates in us this new us, he creates in you a new you. And when he creates in you a new you, he does that because that way you can create a new world. You cannot create what you are not. You can only create out of who you are and what you are. He says, and then you will create out of the broken pieces. Let's go back up just a few verses. I want you to listen to it again. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. Verse 4. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. LA has just been devastated in 2020. We drive down Melrose Avenue to Melrose Place, and we just see building after building after building boarded up. We've seen buildings that have been graffitied and destroyed. We see business after business after business that could not survive the economic devastation of a national quarantine. And behind every building that's now empty are lives that have been devastated as well. Behind every restaurant and every business and every shop that has been lost, there are people who have lost their dreams, and they have lost their futures, and they have lost their hope. He says, no, I'm going to do this in you so that you can rebuild the ancient ruins. I'm going to do this in you so that you can restore the places long devastated. I'm going to do this in you so that you can renew all that's been lost, restore all that's been lost, and create what has never even been imagined. This is what God wants to do through you and through me. He wants to teach us how to create a new world out of the broken pieces of our lives. You know, one of the things you learn as you live longer is that you don't heal as fast as you used to. And I still love to play basketball, and I still love to be competitive and be physical, but I don't heal as fast as I used to. I end up with an injury, and I'm out for 3 weeks. I get hit, and I'm out for 6 weeks. I get hit, I'm suddenly having knee surgery. I'm suddenly having, shoulder surgery, whatever it may be. And it just seems like the older I get, the slower I recover. And yet there's something that I still know to be true. I was just at my doctor's office, and I was playing basketball, and I separated my shoulder, and I tore the AC ligament in my shoulder, and it's been about 5 weeks, and the therapist looked at me and said, I'm really concerned because you heal so fast, and you're still not healed. And I love the fact that I have a reputation for healing fast. I also get injured really fast, so maybe that's the universe compensating between the two. But one of the reasons I know that I heal fast is because I'm willing to embrace pain. See, a lot of people, when they're injured, they allow the pain of that injury to limit their rehabilitation. But I've learned over a lifetime of injuries that if you push through the pain, you will actually heal faster. And the more you can take pain, the more you can actually strengthen the part of you that's been broken. See, I think a lot of us have actually been living our lives trying to avoid pain. And we even thought that God would give us a path in life to avoid pain. In fact, I think a lot of people have taught that. So give your life to Jesus and you'll have a pain-free life. But if you have been following Jesus long enough, you know that that is not reality. See, sometimes when you follow Jesus, you end up with the greatest pain. Sometimes when you follow Jesus, you'll experience pain you would have never experienced if you had not followed him. Because he knows that the pain is necessary for you to have the strength that's required to create the future that God wants you to create for the world around you. And a part of what we do is we learn how to take the broken pieces of who we are and we create a new world through those broken pieces. And so one of the things I've learned as I've gotten older is you have an injury, you learn how to compensate. You have an injury, you learn how to adapt. And as long as you do not allow that wound, that brokenness, that injury to become the defining characteristic of who you are. So you can make a decision. The pain will limit everything in your life, or the pain will simply be one more obstacle you choose to lean into so that you can become stronger on the other end. See, I think for a lot of us, it's really not that we're getting older, it's that we become less willing to face the pain. the pain necessary to achieve greatness, the pain necessary to step into the future God has for you, the pain necessary to create a better world. And by the way, there's nothing God will ever call you to do that has any real meaning or significance that is not going to cost you something. So the question is not, has God called you to do great things? The real question is, are you willing to pay the great price? See, there's a future to be created. Right now, there's a future that will never be created without choices that you need to make. There's a future that your nation needs that can only be created out of your resilience, out of your courage, out of your faith. There's a future that your church needs, that your family needs. It can only come out of it if you decide that you will take the wounds that have marked you and use them as your scars of honor. That you will allow God to take your pain and your suffering, your disappointment, your sorrow, and allow God to use it as the material from which he makes you the healing ointment for everyone that comes in contact with you. That you will not allow yourself to choose to live in a prison where you've built it and you've locked yourself in, but you will allow God to set you free so that no prison can ever hold you back from your freedom. To realize that there's a future that's waiting for someone to have the courage to create it. And just one last thought. He says, look at verse 6. And you will be called priests of the Lord, and you will be named ministers of our God, and you will feed on the wealth of nations, and in their riches you will boast. I don't even know what to do with that, to be honest with you. And I'm not sure how it applies to every one of our lives, but I'm just going to sort of just lean into it right now and just allow myself to receive the benefit of that promise. You will feed on the wealth of nations, and in their riches you will boast. I think what God is saying is that nothing but nothing can hold you back from living the life he created you to live. Because you are the creators of the future. You will be called the priests of the Lord, and you'll be named ministers of our God. And God has leveraged the entire universe in your favor. That everything that God created is created to give us life. Just look at your wealth right now. You breathe deeply of oxygen you did not pay for. You drink of water that was freely placed on this earth. We live on this little rock in the middle of this universe because the entire universe seems to be leveraged in our direction to make sure that we can wake up every day with the opportunity to live the life God created us to live. We came into 2020, it was quite a year. I had big plans for this year. In fact, I was supposed to be in Singapore twice. I was supposed to be in Kuala Lumpur a couple of times. I was supposed to be in Japan once. I was supposed to be in London twice. I was going to be in the United Kingdom and in Europe and in South America several times. And everything came to a painful, abrupt stop. The whole world in my life came to an end. And it's one of those moments where you just almost have to ask God, what are you doing? I thought that this is what I was supposed to do. And maybe you're exactly where I was going. I thought this was the life I had for 2020. This was my future. This was my mission. This was my calling. This was my destiny. Now it's all gone. Then I watched so many of my friends lose their companies, lose their jobs, lose their dreams, lose their future. Some of them lose their families. Too many of them lose their families. Because the weight of the pressure of this moment was more than they could bear. So in the middle of it, I knew I had to create. I knew that in the middle of this crisis, I had to find some way to create a different future. And so we began working on projects, even here at Mosaic in Los Angeles. Kim had a dream of starting of building a school in Malawi, and all of it was coming to an abrupt halt, and we just made a decision. We're going to build that school. And of course, the initial costs that I was given were nowhere close to the real cost of building this school. And this project that I thought would cost us a little bit was now costing us hundreds of thousands, and then was getting close to $750,000. And I could just feel inside of me going, I think we need to stop. I don't know if we can bear this much. But something inside of me said, you can't pull back. You guys just need to keep moving forward, because Kim was not going to surrender this. And my wife was just set on this mission. She was going to build this school with our teams that would educate 1,600 students from around 63 different tribes in one of the poorest and under-resourced countries in the world, on a continent that all of us should take some responsibility to help. And so before I knew it, we were just full force in, and then we saw the foundation being laid for the school. And she comes and says, if they can find a way to do solar energy, they can actually do an adult school for adults. And the dreams did not get smaller. The dreams just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's almost as if God said, don't worry about it. You will feed on the wealth of the nations. That doesn't mean you're going to live in luxury. It means that you will have all the resources you need to fulfill God's purpose in your life and through your life. And in the middle of all that, I knew that I needed to start something new. I'm just going to share with you something very personal. Over 10 years ago, I had a company. I was in the fashion industry, in the film industry, and we were doing so well. And I've always been an entrepreneur. I always worked outside of the church, and we had an economic crisis that just brought everything to a close. And I failed so many times in the past that I'm very familiar with failure, but this one was unexpected because the company was so successful. And then everything just came to an end. And I spent 5 years working my way out of massive debts and years making sure that the people who were involved in the company finished every project. And so Kim and I took about $1 million loan on our house so that we could actually make sure that everyone was taken care of, so that nobody had any negative consequence to working with our company. And that memory stayed with me for the last decade at least. And I've had a warehouse full of vintage World War II material that I used to use to design bags and different materials. And my wife's like, Sally, get rid of it. Just put the past behind you. And my son was like, Aaron's like, Dad, just sell it. Just get rid of it. Let's never go back that way again. But there was something inside of me that said that was one of the most painful moments of my life. And I'm going to hold on to that material, because one day I'm going to create a new future through the material that represents my scars, my brokenness, my wounds. And so during 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of quarantine, I just decided I'm going to go back into the fashion industry. I'm going to start a new line. I'm going to start a new collection. I'm going to create out of the pain. I'm going to create out of the crisis. And I'm going to take the material that represents my wounds and my scars, my failures, my disappointments, and I'm going to use that material to create a new future, to create something beautiful out of it. And so you'll be one of the first ones to see what I'm wearing today is a part of that collection. And I just have these old fabrics that have been redesigned to create a new expression of hope. Now, not everyone wants to design clothes and make a statement through what you wear, but let me tell you, every day when you get up, you're either putting on despair or you're putting on hope. You're either putting on fear or you're putting on courage. And maybe one of the reasons that I'm so drawn to the material is that it's this old World War II canvas, and it reminds me of a time where men and women risked their lives for the freedom of the world. And I want to get up in the morning and remind myself that people need me to live my most heroic life. They need me to answer the question, what kind of future will I create? With the answer, I'm going to create a future filled with hope. I'm going to create a future filled with forgiveness. I'm going to create a future filled with love and compassion and faith. And again, I want to ask you, I don't know what the material of your failures are, the material of your pain and your scars and your disappointments. But I do know this. God can take all the material of all the pain and disappointment of your life and use that material to create a new you, a new life, a new future. Never underestimate what God can do with the material of you. The only question is, what kind of future will you create? What kind of future will you settle for? What kind of future are you willing to fight for? By the way, that's what Jesus did. God himself stepped into human history 2,000 years ago, took on flesh and blood. Talk about choosing a material. He walked among us, lived a sinless, perfect, beautiful life. He allowed himself, though innocent, to be crucified as a criminal. He gave his life as a sacrifice so that we could live. He died a grueling, agonizing death on a cross so that we would always know that there is a future and a hope, that there is freedom for all of us. And if you're in this moment right now and you feel overwhelmed by life, and maybe you're struggling with just discouragement or depression, or maybe you're filled with anxiety or stress, or maybe you just feel like you just had the wind that knocked out of you and you just can't find your way back up on your feet to believe that your future can be better than your past. I want you to realize that that's exactly why Jesus came. He took on the wounds so that he could heal you. He took the pain so that he could actually give you strength. He took on that agonizing death so that he could be your source of life. And he's just waiting for you to open up your life to him, to trust him, so that he can recreate you, so that through you he can create a better world. And if you're listening right now and you've never trusted Jesus with your life, if you've never crossed that line of faith and given your life to him, I want to invite you right now, this moment, to do that with me. I just want to encourage you to pray a very simple prayer. It's just one sentence. It's not everything you and God need to talk about, but it's where it begins. Right now, if you know you need God, if you know you need Jesus, you need his freedom, you need his forgiveness, and maybe you've thought about it, maybe you've struggled with it, but right now you're ready to cross that line of faith and trust Jesus with your life. I just want you to right now just to pray this prayer with me. Jesus, I give you my life. That's it. Just tell him right now. Jesus, I give you my life. It's that simple. Because the moment you give your life to him, he gives his life to you. See, he gave his life for you 2,000 years ago, but he waits for you to give your life to him so that he can put his life in you. And when you have his life in you, you have his ability to see a world you could never imagine. You now have the source of healing where you can become a healer of the world. You now have the source of hope where you can bring hope in the midst of despair. You now have the one who can take all the material of your broken pieces and create a more beautiful future. You have the God who imagined you, the God who created you, living within you. Now you'll begin to imagine what you could never have imagined, and you'll begin to create what you never could have created without the creator of the universe living in you. If you just prayed that prayer, Jesus, I give you my life, I want you to know that the creator of the universe now dwells in you. And today is the beginning of your future. So go home, go to lunch, go to dinner, go to breakfast, get with friends, and ask yourself this question. Begin the conversation. What kind of future are we going to create? God bless you guys.
Pastor Erwin, thank you so much for that incredible talk here today. What an amazing way to wrap up 2020 and launch into 2021. And I'm so excited for all the people that made a decision to follow Jesus today for the first time. We want to say congratulations and welcome home. See, one thing that We would love it if you can do it right now. If you made that decision, go to mosaic.org/followjesus and let us know about the choice you made today. We want to rally around you. We want to support you, and we want to celebrate this decision that you made today. So one of my favorite things that I get to be a part of here at Mosaic is hearing all the stories of people's generosity. And there's countless stories of amazing women and men like yourself that have sacrificed at a high level. And just recently, I heard this story from a friend of mine named Tammy, and she was sharing this legacy of her great-grandfather, who they call Pop. She was talking about how he had an amazing job and he was in his 40s, but he felt this call to Hollywood. He felt this call to Los Angeles, and he moved here and he just started working odd jobs, and eventually he starts working at Warner Brothers, and he becomes the right hand to Jack Warner. In the midst of this, Tammy is sharing about how her great-grandfather, Pop, wanted to not just create a legacy for himself, but for those that would come after him. And he starts just giving people jobs, and he starts putting young kids through USC film school. And she's sharing this beautiful story, this incredible man who realized that life is truly found when you give rather than you take. And she shares about how her great-grandfather died 9 months before she was born, that she never actually met him, yet his generosity and his sacrifice still lives on inside of her. And now her and her husband have been a part of bringing life to Hollywood and creating community for so many artists, because she wanted to make sure that the legacy of Pop continued. And this is what happens when we give together. This is what happens when we become generous individuals, when we decide that it's not about what we get, but it's actually about what we get to give on behalf of others, and know that lives will be forever transformed when we choose to be generous and sacrificial. So on this last Sunday of 2020, man, I think this is a great opportunity for us to say, we're gonna make an investment, not just so that we're better because of it, but so that the future is better because of it. And what are the stories we're gonna hear in 2021 and beyond of lives changed because we sacrifice together? So Mosaic, if you wanna join us and be a part of this, you can go to mosaic.org/give. Let's make a mark. Let's decide that we're gonna be generous and sacrificial like we've never done before, knowing that this is gonna create so much momentum as we step into next year and beyond. We've got something really exciting coming up for the entire month of January. See, every week we're gonna highlight a talk from Pastor Erwin that he's given over the last few years that are some of the most impactful messages that he's ever given. And every time I hear a message for the first time, it really impacts me in a powerful way. But when I hear it a second and a third time, it's crazy how much God reveals new things that I didn't see the first time. And so I know for some of you, this will be the first time you've ever heard these talks, and I'm just excited for us to just engage on these incredible messages in a new and a fresh way. And so I want to invite you to join us this January, every single week. Invite your friends, because it's going to be a really incredible time together. Hey, I hope you have had an amazing Sunday. What a great way to wrap up 2020. And I want to encourage you as we launch into next year, remember, you do not have to do life alone. We love you so much, Mosaic, and we'll see you next week.
To the little lamb, do you see what I see? Way up in the sky, little lamb, do you see what I see? A star dancing in the night with a tail as big as a kite, with a tail as big as a kite. Said the little lamb to the shepherd boy, the song, high above the trees with a voice as big as the sea, with a voice as big as the sea. Say the shepherd boy to the mighty king. Do you know what I know? In your palace, almighty king. Do you know what I know? A child shivers in the cold. Let us bring him silver and gold. Let us bring him silver